The termination papers lay between them like a death sentence. Amora Nwosu stood motionless before the mahogany desk, her reflection fractured across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 63rd floor. Seoul's skyline burned orange behind Kang Tae-jun's silhouette, a city of 20 million people, and not one of them could save her from this moment. Her hand drifted toward her stomach. She caught herself, lowered it immediately. His steel-gray eyes tracked the movement. Dismissed it. Sign, he said. One word. No explanation. Her vision blurred. She refused to blink. Refused to let a single tear fall where he could see it. I thought, her voice cracked. You thought wrong. He didn't even look at her face. His attention had already shifted to the documents before him, as though she had already ceased to exist. Whatever this was, Miss Nwosu, it was nothing. You are nothing. Sign the papers and collect your severance from human resources. Nothing. The word entered her chest like a blade made of ice. She was 6 weeks pregnant with his child. And he would never know. Her hand moved mechanically. Signature. Date. The pen trembled only once. She set it down carefully, aligned with the edge of the desk, one final act of the perfect assistant she had been for 3 years. Then Amora Nwosu turned and walked out of Kang Tae-jun's life. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. 72 hours later, she was gone from Seoul entirely. And the most powerful man in South Korea had no idea what she carried with her. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, do you think she should have told him about the pregnancy? Or did he lose that right the moment he called her nothing? I want to hear your thoughts. Now, let me tell you how they got here. 3 years earlier, Seoul. The elevator doors opened onto the 63rd floor of Taihan Industries, and Amora Nwosu stepped into a world that didn't want her. She felt it immediately. The sidelong glances from executives in tailored suits. The receptionist's micro-expression of surprise, quickly smoothed into professional neutrality. The subtle shift in atmosphere as conversations paused, assessed her, and resumed in lower tones. She was 24 years old. Nigerian. The only black woman on the entire floor. And she had just been hired as the personal assistant to Chairman Kang Tae-jun. The position had been vacant for 11 months. 7 candidates had quit within weeks. 2 had requested transfers. 1 had simply stopped showing up. Nobody told Amora why. She would discover the reason soon enough. The first day. Park Do-hyun, the chairman's chief of staff, met her at the executive reception desk. He was tall, over 6 feet, with a kind of controlled physicality that suggested military training or something more dangerous. His black suit fit like armor. His expression revealed nothing. Miss Nwosu. Mr. Park. He studied her for 3 full seconds. She held his gaze without flinching. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in his face. Approval, perhaps. Or curiosity. You'll need to understand something before you meet him, Do-hyun said. Chairman Kang does not explain himself. He does not repeat instructions. He does not tolerate errors. I don't make errors. The corner of his mouth twitched. We'll see. He led her through a labyrinth of glass-walled offices, past conference rooms filled with men in identical dark suits, until they reached a set of brushed steel doors at the end of the corridor. No nameplate. No indication of what lay beyond. Do-hyun paused with his hand on the door. One more thing. Don't stare at his tattoos. Don't ask about his family. Don't comment on anything you see or hear in this office. Understood. I don't think you do. He opened the door. But you will. The chairman's office. The room was vast and deliberately cold. Minimal furniture. Maximum intimidation. A single massive desk positioned before a wall of windows that made Seoul look small. Bookshelves lined with leather volumes that looked untouched. A sitting area with furniture that had never known casual conversation. And behind the desk, Kang Tae-jun. He didn't look up when she entered. Amora used the moment to observe him, the way a gazelle might observe a lion before deciding whether to run. He was striking in a way that felt almost cruel. Sharp features that belonged on ancient temple carvings. Black hair swept back from a face designed for severity, the kind of beauty that warned rather than welcomed. But it was the details that made her breath catch. The tattoo. Black and grey ink climbed the right side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. She caught fragments, a Roman cross, the curve of a serpent's body, wisps of smoke shading that suggested depth and shadow. His shirt cuffs were folded once at the wrist, revealing the edges of extensive sleeve work on both forearms. Dark roses. Roman numerals. What might have been an angel's wing. His hands were visible on the desk, fingers interlaced. His knuckles bore letters. Owner on the right hand. E on the left. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't ask. Miss Nwosu. His voice was quiet. Not soft, there was nothing soft about it, but quiet in the way that thunder is quiet in the moment before lightning strikes. He still hadn't looked up. Chairman Kang. You're from Lagos. Yes, sir. You graduated first in your class from the International Business Program at Seoul National University. Yes, sir. You speak 5 languages. English, Korean, Yoruba, French, Mandarin. 6, sir. I've been studying Japanese. Finally, he looked up. Steel grey eyes met warm brown. The impact was physical. Like stepping into deep water. Like the moment before falling. Amora didn't look away. Taejun's expression didn't change. But something flickered in those grey depths, something too fast to identify. Your predecessor lasted 6 days, he said. The one before her, 4. The one before that made it 2 weeks before she cried in the elevator and never came back. I don't cry, sir. Everyone cries eventually. Then you haven't met everyone. Silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Do-hyun, still standing by the door, had gone completely still. Then Taejun's gaze dropped back to his documents. Your desk is outside. Do-hyun will explain your duties. You'll have a trial period of 30 days. If you're still here after that, we'll discuss permanent terms. I'll be here. He didn't respond. Amora turned and walked out, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She didn't know it then, couldn't possibly have known, but her life had just divided into 2 parts. Before Kang Taejun. And after. The first month. Amora learned quickly. She learned that Taejun arrived at the office before dawn and rarely left before midnight. That he took his coffee black, no sugar, precisely at 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. That he read every document she prepared with terrifying attention, catching errors that shouldn't have been possible to notice. She learned that he never raised his voice because he never needed to. One quiet word. One cold glance. One moment of silence that stretched too long. That was enough. People feared him in ways she had never witnessed before. Executives worth hundreds of millions of dollars left his office with trembling hands. Government officials spoke to him with the careful deference usually reserved for heads of state. And Amora learned something else. Something nobody told her directly. Taihan Industries, the legitimate construction and real estate empire, was a mask. Beneath the corporate surface, Kang Taejun controlled something far more dangerous. She pieced it together slowly. Late-night visitors who arrived without appointments and left without signing in. Phone calls conducted in a dialect she didn't recognize, older Korean, formal in ways that felt ceremonial. Documents that crossed her desk with references to families and territories and arrangements. The Kang Syndicate. One of the most powerful organized crime networks in East Asia. And Kang Taejun was its king. They called him the Silent King in whispered conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. A man who had inherited a criminal empire at 25 and had spent 13 years making it untouchable. Amora should have run. Any sensible person would have. But she didn't. She told herself it was about the job. The salary. The opportunity to prove herself in a city that had never made space for someone like her. That was a lie. And somewhere deep inside, she already knew it. The second month. She started noticing things. The way his eyes followed her when she moved through his office. Quick glances. Immediately suppressed. The way his voice changed slightly when he spoke to her, still cold, still commanding, but with something underneath. Something almost careful. The way his jaw tightened when other men looked at her too long. She noticed because she couldn't stop watching him either. It was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. He was her employer. He was a crime lord. He was a man who had built his entire existence around control and distance and the systematic elimination of weakness. And yet, when their fingers brushed during a document exchange, neither of them pulled away immediately. When she worked late, which was often, she sometimes caught him watching her through the glass wall of his office. Not with desire. With something more unsettling. Curiosity. As though he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. The night everything changed. It happened during a thunderstorm. 3 months into her employment. Past midnight. The building was empty except for security, and the 63rd floor was silent except for the rain hammering against the windows. Amora was preparing documents for an early morning meeting when the power flickered. Once. Twice. Then darkness. The emergency lights kicked on after a few seconds, bathing everything in dim red. She heard his office door open. Miss Nwosu. I'm fine, sir. Just a power surge. Come here. His voice was different. Still quiet, but with an edge she hadn't heard before. She walked to his doorway and stopped. Taejun stood by the windows, his silhouette outlined against the storm. Lightning illuminated him in fragments, the strong line of his jaw, the darkness of his eyes, the tattoo climbing his neck like a promise of violence. Do you know why your predecessors left? They couldn't handle the pressure. No. He turned slightly. The red emergency lighting caught his features. They were afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Should I? He moved closer. 1 step. 2. Amora's heart rate accelerated, but she didn't step back. I'm not a good man, Miss Nwosu. I know. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. Probably. Then why are you still here? The question hung between them like smoke. Amora should have lied. Should have cited professional ambition or financial necessity or any of the reasonable explanations she had prepared for herself. Instead, she told the truth. Because you're the first person in this city who looked at me and didn't see an anomaly. You just saw someone who was good at her job. Something shifted in his expression. The ice cracked. Just for a moment. That's not all I see. The words were barely audible above the thunder. Amora stopped breathing. He was close now. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, with notes of sandalwood and smoke. Close enough to see the individual threads of grey in his eyes. Close enough to make a mistake. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. You're my employer. I know. We shouldn't. I know. But neither of them moved away. The lightning flashed again. And in that moment of illumination, Amora saw something in Kang Taejun's eyes that terrified her far more than his reputation or his power or the darkness of his world. She saw vulnerability. Raw, unwilling, absolutely genuine. This man who controlled empires and commanded armies and made powerful people tremble with a glance. This man was looking at her like she was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. And Amora realized, with sudden devastating clarity, that she was already in love with him. The months that followed. They didn't speak about that night. For weeks, they maintained professional distance, longer meetings, shorter glances, careful avoidance of any contact that might reignite what had almost happened. But the tension built. It built in every late night when they were the only ones on the floor. In every accidental touch. In every moment when their eyes met and neither could look away. It built until it became unsustainable. The first time he kissed her was in the private elevator. 3 seconds between floors. No witnesses. No words. Just his mouth on hers, fierce and desperate and completely at odds with every wall he had built around himself. When the doors opened, they stepped apart. Neither acknowledged what had happened. But that night, Amora went home with trembling hands and the taste of him still on her lips. And she knew, that this could only end in destruction. She went forward anyway. The secret relationship. What followed was a study in contradiction. In public, they were chairman and assistant. Professional. Distant. Impeccable. In private, rare, stolen, dangerous private moments, they were something else entirely. Tae-jun never took her to restaurants. Never introduced her to anyone. Never acknowledged what existed between them in any way that could be observed or documented. Instead, he came to her small apartment in the hours past midnight. Left before dawn. Held her with a desperation that suggested he was drowning and she was the only solid ground he had ever found. He told her things in those dark hours. Fragments of himself that he had never shared with anyone. His mother had died when he was 12. His father had been murdered by a rival family when he was 23. He had killed his first man at 17, self-defense, technically, but the distinction had stopped mattering long ago. He told her about the loneliness of power. The way everyone wanted something from him. The way he had learned to trust no one because trust was a luxury that got people killed. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted once, his face buried against her neck. "I don't know how to be with someone without destroying them." "Then don't destroy me. I might not have a choice." She should have listened to that warning. She didn't. The invisible woman. But even as Amora fell deeper, she began to notice the truth of her position. She was invisible. Not to Tae-jun. He saw her with an intensity that sometimes made her forget to breathe. But to everyone else. She was the foreign assistant. The black woman who had somehow lasted longer than anyone expected. The anomaly that people stopped noticing because acknowledging her would require acknowledging their own discomfort. No one knew about the relationship. That was intentional, of course. Necessary. The chairman of Taihan Industries, the head of the Kang Syndicate, could not be seen with his secretary. It would create complications. Vulnerabilities. Opportunities for enemies. Amora understood this intellectually. But emotionally, she began to feel like a secret he was ashamed of. She watched him host parties for Seoul's elite, surrounded by beautiful Korean women who photographed well beside him. She watched him smile for cameras with actresses and heiresses and the daughters of powerful men. She watched, and she said nothing, because what could she say? "I know you come to me in the dark. I know you whisper my name like a prayer. But when the sun rises, you pretend I don't exist." She was his secret. And secrets, by definition, are things people are not proud of. The complication. 6 weeks before the termination. Amora woke before dawn with nausea rolling through her in waves. She made it to the bathroom just in time. When the sickness passed, she sat on the cold tile floor and did the math. Her period was 2 weeks late. She was never late. The pregnancy test confirmed what she already suspected. Positive. Amora stared at the result for a long time, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. A child. Tae-jun's child. For one wild moment, she felt something close to joy. A baby. A family. Maybe this was the thing that would finally bring their relationship into the light. Maybe this was the reason he would stop treating her like a shameful secret. But even as hope flickered, fear drowned it. She knew what he was. What his world was. She had seen the documents that crossed her desk, the arrangements that went wrong, the complications that had to be resolved. She had seen the way his face changed when he spoke about vulnerability, about weakness, about the dangers of attachment. "I've spent my entire life eliminating emotional attachments," he had told her once. "They create opportunities for enemies." What would he say about a child? About the ultimate vulnerability? About the thing that would tie him to her forever, regardless of whether he wanted that connection? Amora made a decision. She would wait. She would find the right moment, a soft evening, a gentle conversation, a time when he seemed open and unguarded. And then she would tell him. But the right moment never came. Because 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. The betrayal. It started with a photograph. Someone on the 63rd floor had noticed something. A glance held too long. A door closing at the wrong time. A late night that extended past professional necessity. The photograph showed Tae-jun's car parked outside Amora's apartment building at 2 a.m. It landed on his desk during a board meeting, delivered by a shareholder who smiled too widely. Interesting choice, Chairman Kang. I didn't realize Taihan Industries had such progressive international relations. The implication was clear, and humiliating, and dangerous. That night, Tae-jun didn't come to her apartment. He didn't call. For 3 days, he didn't acknowledge her existence at all. When he finally summoned her to his office, his face was carved from stone. This ends now. Amora felt the words like a physical blow. I don't understand. Yes, you do. His voice was cold. Colder than she had ever heard it. Someone knows. Someone took photographs. This compromises everything I've built. We could. There is no we, Miss Nwosu. He cut her off without raising his voice. The quiet was worse than shouting. There was never a we. There was a temporary arrangement that has now become a liability. A temporary arrangement. A liability. Amora's hand moved toward her stomach before she could stop it. She caught herself. Lowered it. But not fast enough. Tae-jun's eyes tracked the movement. His expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been suspicion. Then his face closed again, and whatever he had seen, he chose not to address it. You'll receive a generous severance, he continued, his attention already shifting to the documents on his desk. More than fair, given the circumstances. Human resources will have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. Tae-jun. Chairman Kang. The correction was instant and brutal. You're an employee, Miss Nwosu. Nothing more. Whatever you imagined existed between us was exactly that, imagination. Nothing. Whatever you imagined. Amora felt something break inside her. Something that had been holding hope, holding possibility, holding the belief that he felt what she felt. She opened her mouth to tell him. To say the words that would change everything. I'm pregnant. It's your child. You can't do this. But she looked at his face, the cold mask, the deliberate indifference, the way he had already dismissed her as insignificant, and she understood something devastating. He would not be happy. He would not suddenly transform into the man she had hoped he might become. He would see this pregnancy as another complication, another liability, another problem to be resolved. And Amora knew, with sudden terrible clarity, that she could not let her child grow up as someone's complication. So she said nothing. I'll have the papers by tomorrow, she whispered. She turned and walked out. Behind her, she heard him exhale. He didn't call her back. The final day. The termination meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. Amora arrived at 7:45. She had not slept. She had spent the night packing what little she could carry, booking flights, and crying into her pillow until no tears remained. The office was quiet. Do-hyun was waiting outside Tae-jun's door, his expression unreadable. Miss Nwosu. Mr. Park. He studied her for a long moment. She wondered if he could tell she had been crying. If he could see the slight changes in her body that she had been hiding beneath loose clothing. If he suspected what she was carrying. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry. She didn't respond. The door opened. And she walked into the office for the last time. The dismissal. The termination papers lay between them like a death sentence. This is where we began. This is the moment Amora stood before his desk, her reflection fractured across the windows, her hand drifting toward her stomach before she caught herself. This is the moment Kang Tae-jun looked at the woman carrying his child and said, whatever this was, Miss Nwosu, it was nothing. You are nothing. This is the moment she signed her name and walked out forever. But here is what happened next. The departure. Amora went directly from Taihan Industries to Incheon Airport. She did not go back to her apartment. She had already given notice, already shipped her few possessions, already erased herself from the life she had built in Seoul. The flight to Lagos was 14 hours. She spent most of it staring out the window at clouds that looked like morning veils. Her hand rested on her stomach the entire time. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, so quietly that even the passenger beside her couldn't hear. "I'm going to give you everything he never could." A single tear escaped despite her efforts. She wiped it away before it could fall. Behind her, Seoul disappeared into the distance. And Kang Tae-jun had no idea that his entire legacy, his blood, his air, his future, was disappearing with it. The immediate aftermath. Seoul. It took Tae-jun 3 days to notice she was gone. Not just from the office, from the city entirely. At first, he told himself it was irrelevant. She was a former employee. Her whereabouts were no longer his concern. The problem had been solved, the liability had been eliminated, the potential scandal had been contained. He threw himself into work with renewed ferocity. But he kept looking toward her empty desk. He kept expecting to hear her voice during meetings, offering the quiet observations that had become invaluable over 3 years. He kept reaching for her in the dark hours of the night, before remembering that she was gone. "Where is she?" he asked Do-hyun finally, on the 4th day. Do-hyun looked up from his tablet. "Who, sir?" "Miss Nwosu." She left Seoul. Resigned completely. No forwarding address. Something cold settled in Tae-jun's chest. "Find her." Do-hyun hesitated. "Sir, you terminated her employment. You said she was a liability. You said." "I know what I said." His voice was sharp. Too sharp. "Find her." Do-hyun bowed slightly and left. But when he returned the next day, his report was empty. Amora Nwosu had vanished. Her apartment cleared out. Her phone disconnected. Her bank accounts closed. Even her digital footprint had been carefully erased. She had left Seoul without a trace, as though she had never existed at all. And for the first time in 13 years as head of the Kang Syndicate, Tae-jun found himself facing a problem he could not solve. A woman who had simply chosen to disappear. And a void in his chest that no amount of power could fill. 6 years later, Lagos, Nigeria. The gallery opening was the most anticipated event of the Lagos art season. Amora Nwosu, now Amora of the Nwosu Foundation, stood near the entrance, accepting congratulations from collectors and critics with the gracious confidence of someone who had built something remarkable from nothing. The foundation supported emerging African artists, connecting them with international galleries and buyers. It had started as a small project funded by her severance package and had grown into one of West Africa's most respected cultural institutions. She was 33 now. Different from the woman who had fled Seoul 6 years ago. Stronger. More self-possessed. Dressed in elegant African-inspired fashion that announced rather than apologized for her heritage. A deep burgundy wrapper dress with gold embroidery, her hair styled in sophisticated goddess locks that swept past her shoulders. But the most significant change was currently tugging at her hand. "Mama, can I see the blue painting again?" Amora looked down at her son. Kang Minit-jun was 5 years old, and he was beautiful in ways that made her heart ache. He had inherited her skin tone, deep brown that glowed like polished mahogany. Her expressive features. Her curiosity about everything. But his eyes were steel gray. His cheekbones were sharp in ways that didn't come from her family. And when he concentrated, when he studied something with that intense, unwavering focus, he looked exactly like his father. "The blue painting is in the next room," Amora said, keeping her voice light. "But we need to stay here for a little while longer. Mama has to talk to the guests." "The guests are boring." Minit-jun's tone was matter-of-fact. "They keep talking about investment and returns. I don't know what those words mean." Amora laughed despite herself. "You will someday." "Will I be like them?" He wrinkled his nose. "They smell like perfume and worry." "They smell like," Amora shook her head, smiling. "Where do you come up with these things?" "I observe." He said it seriously, the way a tiny scientist might announce an important discovery. "That's what Uncle Emeka says. Good leaders observe before they speak." Before Amora could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "This child is going to rule the world someday." Chidinma Okafor appeared beside them, holding 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to Amora and kept the other, eyeing Minute-jun with fond exasperation. Or destroy it, Amora murmured. Same thing, really. Minute-jun tugged at Amora's hand again. Mama. The blue painting. Go. Chidinma nodded toward the next room. I'll cover for you. The collectors can survive without your attention for 10 minutes. Amora hesitated, then allowed her son to pull her away from the crowd. As they walked, she watched his profile, the determined set of his jaw, the serious expression he wore when pursuing something he wanted. He looked so much like Tae-jun that sometimes it stole her breath. She had never told him about his father. Minute-jun knew he didn't have one, at least, not one who was present. He had asked questions, of course. He was too intelligent not to. But Amora had given careful, limited answers. Your father lives very far away. He didn't know about you when I left. It's complicated. Minute-jun had accepted these explanations with the pragmatic grace of a child who trusted his mother completely. But lately, his questions had become more pointed. Why doesn't he know about me? Did you tell him? If I wrote him a letter, would he write back? Does he look like me? Each question drove a small blade deeper into Amora's heart. Because the truth was complicated. She had convinced herself that leaving was the right choice. That raising Minute-jun away from Tae-jun's world, away from the violence and danger and emotional coldness, was the best thing she could do for him. But sometimes, in the dark hours of the night, doubt crept in. Should I have told him? Did I take his child away without giving him a chance? Was I protecting Minute-jun? Or punishing Tae-jun? She never found satisfying answers. The blue painting. They found the painting in a quiet corner of the gallery. It was an abstract piece, layers of blue and silver and black that suggested depth without revealing shape. The artist had titled it What Remains When You Leave. Minute-jun stood before it silently, his grey eyes moving across the canvas with that intense concentration that made Amora's chest tighten. It's sad, he said finally. What makes you say that? The colors are crying. He pointed to where silver streaked through blue. See, those are tears. Amora looked at the painting with new eyes. He was right. Sometimes people make art about sadness, she said carefully. It helps them feel less alone. Were you sad when you painted? I didn't paint this, baby. Another artist did. I know. Minute-jun turned to look at her. But you were sad too. When I was a baby. I remember. You were too young to remember. I remember your crying. His voice was certain. You thought I was sleeping, but I heard. Amora's throat tightened. I'm not sad anymore, she said, pulling him close. I have you. How could I be sad? Minute-jun allowed the embrace but didn't seem convinced. Mama, he said, his voice muffled against her dress. What happened to my father? The question hit her like cold water. I told you, baby. He lives far away. That's not what I asked. He pulled back, looking up at her with those steel-grey eyes. What happened to him? Something made you leave. Something made you sad. What was it? Amora stared at her son. He was 5 years old, but in moments like this, he seemed ancient. It's complicated, she whispered. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to answer. Because it's true. Minute-jun studied her face the way Tae-jun used to, reading her micro-expressions, searching for truth she wasn't speaking. Finally, he nodded. Okay. He took her hand again. But someday you'll tell me. Someday. Promise. Amora swallowed hard. Promise. They stood together before the blue painting, mother and son, while Lagos glittered beyond the gallery windows and Seoul remained a wound that had never fully healed. Across the world, Seoul. 6 years had changed Kang Tae-jun in ways that surprised even those who knew him best. He was still powerful. Still feared. Still the silent king who controlled empires and commanded armies. But something was different. The coldness that had always been his signature had deepened into something more like emptiness. He moved through his days with mechanical precision, meetings, negotiations, the endless management of territories and alliances, but there was a hollowness to it now, as though some essential light had been extinguished. Do-hyun had noticed. He noticed everything. "You should take a vacation," he suggested one evening, as Tae-jun reviewed documents in his office. "When was the last time you left Seoul for something other than business?" "I don't take vacations." "That's my point." Tae-jun didn't respond. His attention had shifted to a photograph on his desk, one that shouldn't have been there. It was old, creased at the edges, the only physical evidence that Amoran Wosu had ever existed in his life. He didn't remember keeping it. Perhaps he hadn't meant to. But somehow, it had remained in his desk drawer for 6 years, and he had never been able to throw it away. "Sir." Tae-jun looked up. Do-hyun was watching him with an expression that bordered on concern. A rare display of emotion from a man trained to show none. "The Lagos Consortium Conference," Do-hyun said. "The organizers have requested your attendance. They're specifically interested in expanding partnerships with Asian enterprises." "Send someone else." "They asked for you specifically. It's an important opportunity for international expansion." "I said no." Do-hyun paused. "Sir, I understand your reluctance to travel to West Africa, given." "Given what?" Silence. They both knew what had gone unsaid. Given that she came from there. Given that she disappeared into that continent and never emerged. Given that Lagos is exactly where the last trace of Amoran Wosu vanished 6 years ago. "I'll review the proposal," Tae-jun said finally. "Leave the documents." Do-hyun nodded and withdrew. Alone in his office, Tae-jun picked up the photograph. Amora's face looked back at him, younger, softer, still carrying the hope he had destroyed with a single word. Nothing. He had called her nothing. And then she had proven it by vanishing so completely that even his extensive network couldn't find her. For 6 years, he had tried. Quietly. Obsessively. Without telling anyone why. He had hired investigators. Contacted international agencies. Used every resource available to the most powerful syndicate in East Asia. And found exactly nothing. Amoran Wosu had become a ghost. And Tae-jun had learned something devastating about himself in the years of searching. He had called her nothing. But losing her had made him realize that she was everything. The decision. The Lagos Consortium conference documents sat on his desk for 3 days. Every time Tae-jun tried to delegate the trip to someone else, he found an excuse to delay. On the 4th day, Do-hyun entered his office with a tablet. "Sir. Something you should see." The tablet showed a news article from an African business publication. Lagos Art Foundation celebrates 5th anniversary. Founder Amoran Wosu honored for cultural contributions. Below the headline was a photograph. Amora, standing before a crowd of admirers, her smile radiant, her confidence transformed. She looked like a completely different woman. No, that wasn't quite right. She looked like the woman she had always been capable of becoming. And standing beside her, partially hidden by her body but visible enough to make Tae-jun's blood freeze in his veins. A child. Small. Maybe 5 years old. Dark skin and grey eyes and features that made Tae-jun's heart stop beating. Features he recognized. Because he saw them every morning in the mirror. When was this photo taken? His voice didn't sound like his own. 3 months ago, sir. And the child? Do-hyun hesitated. The article doesn't mention a child directly. I've done preliminary research. No official records list Amoran Wosu as a mother. No birth certificates have been filed in her name in Nigeria or South Korea. But the child exists. Yes, sir. Tae-jun stared at the photograph. The child's eyes. His eyes. The child's jaw. His jaw. The child's expression, that focused, serious look, was one he had seen in his own childhood photos. I'm pregnant. It's your child. The words Amora had never spoken. Because he had never given her the chance. You are nothing. Whatever you imagined existed between us was exactly that. Imagination. He had said those words while she was carrying his child. And she had walked out without telling him. Because why would she? Why would she give him the chance to reject their baby the way he had rejected her? The realization hit him like a physical blow. 5 years. He had a child. A son or daughter he had never known existed. And Amora had been raising that child alone, while he searched for her without even knowing why the loss felt so devastating. "Book me on a flight to Lagos," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. But Do-hyun had known him for 20 years, and he recognized the storm building behind those grey eyes. "Sir." Tonight. Tae-jun sat alone in his office as Seoul glittered beyond the windows. The tablet lay face up on his desk, the photograph of Amora and the child still displayed. He couldn't stop looking at those eyes. His eyes. In a child he had never held. Never protected. Never even known existed. He thought about the day he had dismissed her. The way her hand had drifted toward her stomach before she caught herself. The micro-expression of devastation that had crossed her face when he called her nothing. She had been protecting the child even then. From him. Because he had made her believe that her baby would be nothing more than a liability. A complication. A problem to be resolved. Tae-jun closed his eyes. When he opened them, the tablet was still there. And he knew, with devastating certainty, that he was about to face the consequences of every cruel word he had ever spoken. He picked up his phone and began making arrangements to fly to Lagos. Lagos, Nigeria. The arrival. The humidity hit Tae-jun like a wall the moment he stepped off the private jet. Lagos spread before him in waves of color and sound, a city of 20 million souls moving with rhythms he had never experienced. The air smelled of ocean salt, exhaust fumes, and something floral he couldn't identify. Motorcycles wove between luxury vehicles. Street vendors called out in languages that blended into a symphony of commerce and life. It was nothing like Seoul. And somewhere in this vast, pulsing city, Amora was raising his child. Do-hyun had traveled with him, along with a small security team that remained deliberately unobtrusive. The official reason for the trip was the Lagos Consortium Conference. The real reason sat heavy in Tae-jun's chest like a stone. The Foundation's headquarters is in Victoria Island, Do-hyun reported, reading from his tablet as their convoy moved through traffic. She lives in a private residence nearby. The child attends an international school. Name. Do-hyun paused. "Sir." The child's name. A moment of hesitation. "Kang Minit-jun." She gave him your family name. Tae-jun's hands tightened on his knees. Kang. She had given the child his surname. Despite everything. Despite the cruelty. Despite the dismissal. She had named the boy after the man who had called her nothing. She never tried to hide his parentage, Do-hyun continued quietly. The name is registered in Nigerian records. Anyone who looked would find it. Then why didn't we find it earlier? Because we weren't looking for a child, sir. We were looking for a woman who didn't want to be found. Tae-jun stared out the window. The city blurred past, a kaleidoscope of life he couldn't focus on. All he could see was that photograph. Grey eyes in a small face. His son. The first sighting. The gallery was hosting an afternoon exhibition when Tae-jun arrived. He didn't enter immediately. Instead, he stood across the street in the shadow of a colonial-era building, watching the entrance through dark sunglasses. People came and went, art collectors, journalists, curious visitors. The building itself was beautiful, whitewashed walls and large windows that let Lagos sunlight pour through. And then she appeared. Amora stepped out of the gallery's front entrance, speaking with a tall Nigerian man in an expensive suit. She was laughing at something he said, a genuine laugh that transformed her face. Tae-jun felt the sound like a blade between his ribs. He had never made her laugh like that. In all their months together, he had never seen her this unguarded, this free. She wore a flowing dress in deep emerald green, her goddess locks pulled back from her face with gold clips. She looked healthy, successful, happy. She looked like someone who had built a beautiful life without him. And beside her, holding her hand with the casual possessiveness of a child who had never doubted his mother's love. Minit-jun. The boy was small for 5 years old, but there was nothing fragile about his presence. He stood straight, his grey eyes scanning the street with an alertness that seemed too mature for his age. He watches everything, Tae-jun realized. Just like I do. Then Minute-jun's gaze moved across the street. And stopped. For one frozen moment, father and son looked at each other. Minute-jun couldn't possibly know who he was looking at. He couldn't possibly understand why this tall Korean stranger in the expensive dark suit made him stop mid-step. But something flickered in those grey eyes. Curiosity. Recognition. Something deeper. Amora noticed her son's distraction. She followed his gaze across the street. And saw Tae-jun. The recognition. The world stopped. Tae-jun watched the sequence of emotions cross Amora's face. Surprise, then shock, then fear, then something he couldn't identify. She went completely still. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Amora's hand tightened on Minute-jun's, and she turned away, guiding her son back toward the gallery entrance with deliberate calm. Mama. Minute-jun's voice carried across the street. Who was that man? Nobody. Baby. Let's go inside. He was looking at us. People look at us all the time. Come on. They disappeared into the building. And Tae-jun remained frozen on the sidewalk, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. She had seen him. And her first instinct had been to flee. Hours later, Tae-jun waited. He waited through the afternoon, watching the gallery from a distance. He waited as the Lagos sun dipped toward the horizon and painted the city in shades of gold and amber. He waited until the last visitors left and the staff began closing the building. But Amora didn't emerge. At sunset, Do-hyun approached him carefully. Sir. She left through a back-in trance 2 hours ago. Of course she did. Where? Her residence. It's a private compound in Banana Island. Tae-jun absorbed this information. Banana Island was one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Lagos. Artificial islands connected by bridges, home to Nigeria's elite. She had built herself a kingdom. The security. Private guards. Electronic surveillance. She's been careful. Because of him. The realization twisted in his chest. She had fortified her life because she knew, someday, he might come looking. I want a meeting, Tae-jun said. Arrange it. Sir, if she doesn't want to see you. Make her want to. Do-hyun hesitated. With respect, sir, this isn't Seoul. You have no leverage here. No territory. No power. If she refuses. She won't refuse. How can you be certain? Tae-jun turned to face his chief of staff fully. The fading sunlight caught the tattoo along his neck, the serpent seeming to move in the shifting shadows. Because she gave him my name, he said quietly. She could have erased me completely. She could have pretended I never existed. But she gave our son my name. He looked back toward the gallery. She wanted him to know who his father was. Even if she never intended for me to know he existed. The words sat between them, heavy with implication. Find a way, Tae-jun said. I don't care how. I need to speak with her. The residence. Banana Island. Amora stood at the window of Minute-jun's bedroom, watching her son sleep. The room was filled with soft blue light from a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. Stuffed animals lined the shelves. Children's drawings covered the walls, colorful explosions of imagination that made her smile even in her darkest moments. Minute-jun slept with one arm thrown over his pillow, his face peaceful in a way that made her heart ache. He looked so much like his father. He had always looked like Tae-jun, but somehow, after seeing the man himself on that Lagos street, the resemblance seemed more pronounced. The shape of his eyebrows. The angle of his cheekbones. The serious set of his mouth even in sleep. Amora pressed her fingers against the cool glass. He found us. She had known this day would come eventually. She had prepared for it in abstract terms, security measures, legal protections, escape plans if necessary. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing him. 6 years had changed Tae-jun. He was broader now, his features more severe, the weight of his world more visible in the lines around his eyes. But those eyes themselves, steel gray and devastatingly intense, were exactly the same. And when he had looked at her across that street, she had felt everything she had spent 6 years trying to bury come rushing back. The love. The pain. The desperate hope that had turned to ash in his office when he called her nothing. Mama. Amora turned sharply. Minute-jun was sitting up in bed, his grey eyes reflecting the nightlight. Baby, you should be sleeping. I had a dream about the man. Amora's blood went cold. What man? The one from the street. The one who was watching us. Minute-jun rubbed his eyes. In my dream, he was standing outside our house. He looked sad. Amora crossed to the bed and sat on the edge, smoothing her son's hair. It was just a dream. Dreams mean things. Minute-jun said it with the certainty of a child who had absorbed too many of his grandmother's stories. Grandma says dreams are messages. Grandma says a lot of things. Is he someone you know? The question hung in the air. Amora looked at her son, at his grey eyes, his serious expression, the intelligence that seemed to see straight through her. She had always known this moment would come. She had just hoped for more time. Yes, she whispered. He's someone I knew. A long time ago. Before I was born. Yes. Minute-jun processed this information with that careful intensity that reminded her so much of Tai-jun. Is he why you were sad? Minute-jun. You told me about the blue painting. About how people make art about sadness. He reached for her hand. Were you sad because of him? Amora's eyes burned. I was sad about a lot of things, she said carefully. But I stopped being sad because I had you. But he made you sad first. It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that. Minute-jun squeezed her hand. Is he my father? The word hit her like a physical blow. Father. He had never asked so directly before. He had asked about fathers in abstract, why he didn't have one, where they went, why other children had them and he didn't. But he had never pointed to a specific person and asked. Until now. Why would you think that? Amora's voice shook despite her efforts. He looked at me. Minute-jun's tone was matter-of-fact. Not like regular people look. He looked at me like he recognized me. People look at you because you're beautiful. No, Mama. Minute-jun shook his head. He looked at me like you do. Like he knew me before I was born. Amora stared at her son. 5 years old. Far too perceptive for his own good. We'll talk about this tomorrow, she said finally. It's too late now, and you need sleep. You always say tomorrow. This time I mean it. Minute-jun studied her face, then nodded slowly. Okay. He lay back down, pulling the blanket up to his chin. But Mama, if he is my father, I don't think he's a bad person. Why do you say that? Because he looked sad too. Minute-jun closed his eyes. And bad people don't get sad about things they did wrong. Amora sat frozen on the edge of the bed, her son's words echoing in her head. Outside, the Lagos night pressed against the windows. And somewhere in this city, Kang Tai-jun was planning his next move. The next morning, the foundation. Amora arrived at work before dawn. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, standing across that street, watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. The foundation's offices were quiet at this hour. Only security personnel moved through the building, nodding respectfully as she passed. She went directly to her office and locked the door. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed Chidinma's number. It rang 4 times before her friend answered. Do you know what time it is? He's here. Silence on the other end. Who's here? Chidinma's voice was suddenly sharp. Amora, what's happening? Tai-jun. He's in Lagos. He saw me. He saw Minute-jun. Oh, God. I don't know what to do. Amora's voice cracked. I've had 6 years to prepare for this, and I don't know what to do. Okay. Breathe. Chidinma's tone shifted into the calm, practical register she used during crises. Did he approach you? No. He was across the street. But he saw Minit-jun. The way he looked at him, he knows. I could see it in his face. Has he contacted you? Not yet. But he will. What do you want to do? The question cut through Amora's panic. What did she want? For 6 years, she had told herself she wanted nothing from Tae-jun. She wanted to raise her son in peace, far from his dangerous world. She wanted to build a life that proved she didn't need him, had never needed him. But now that he was here, now that confrontation was inevitable. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to run again. Take Minit-jun and disappear somewhere he can never find us. You can't run forever, Amora. I know. And Minit-jun deserves to know his father. Does he? Amora's voice hardened. Does he deserve to know a man who called me nothing while I was carrying him? A man who runs criminal empires and eliminates problems with phone calls. That's not your choice to make anymore. Chidinma's tone was gentle but firm. Minit-jun is old enough to ask questions. He's old enough to notice that other children have fathers. And if Tae-jun is determined to be part of his life, he doesn't get to make that choice. Not after what he did. I'm not saying he does. I'm saying you need to be prepared for the conversation. Because it's coming, whether you want it or not. Amora closed her eyes. Outside her office window, Lagos was waking up. The city that had become her sanctuary was suddenly full of shadows. I'll call you later, she said. Amora. I need to think. She hung up before Chidinma could respond. Then she sat in the silence of her office and waited for the inevitable. Mid-morning. The flowers arrived at 10 a.m. A massive arrangement of white orchids and deep purple roses, delivered by a courier who spoke impeccable English and wore a suit that cost more than most Nigerians earned in a month. No card. No message. None was needed. Amora stared at the flowers for a long moment, then instructed her assistant to donate them to a nearby hospital. At 11:30, a package arrived. Inside was a USB drive containing documentation, legal paperwork establishing Kang Tae-jun's parental rights under both Nigerian and Korean law. Nothing filed yet. Just preparation. A message, she understood. I know. And I'm not going away. At 1 p.m., her assistant knocked on the door. Ma, there's a man here. He says he has an appointment. I don't have any appointments this afternoon. He was very insistent, Ma. He said to tell you that he's prepared to wait as long as necessary. Amora's heart rate accelerated. His name. The assistant glanced at her notepad. Park Do-hyun. Not Tae-jun himself. His right-hand man. Amora took a breath. Then another. Send him in. The meeting. Do-hyun looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, controlled, professionally blank. He entered her office with the careful deference of someone who understood he was on foreign territory. Miss Nwosu. He bowed slightly. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I didn't agree to anything. You gave me very little choice. I apologize for the intrusion. Do you? Amora didn't stand from behind her desk. Or does your employer simply expect everyone to accommodate his schedule? A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed Do-hyun's face. You've changed. 6 years will do that. He noticed. I'm sure he noticed many things. Amora leaned back in her chair. What does he want, Mr. Park? A conversation. Nothing more. And if I refuse? Do-hyun hesitated. He won't force the issue. But he also won't leave Lagos until you've spoken. He can stay as long as he likes. It's a free country. Miss Nwosu. Do-hyun's voice dropped slightly. I've known Chairman Kang for 20 years. I've never seen him like this. When he saw that photograph, the one with Minit-jun, something changed. Something changed 6 years ago when he called me nothing. I know. Do you? Amora's voice hardened. Were you in the room, Mr. Park? Did you hear what he said? Did you see his face when he dismissed me like I was a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness? No. But I saw what happened after. Amora paused. After? Do-hyun met her eyes. He looked for you. From the day you left, he looked for you. He never stopped. That's not. He hired investigators. International agencies. He used every resource available to him. Do-hyun's expression was carefully neutral, but something underneath suggested genuine emotion. For 6 years, finding you was his private obsession. He never told anyone why. He barely admitted it to himself. But I know because I handled the logistics. Amora felt the ground shift beneath her. He looked for me. Every day. But he said I was nothing. People say things they don't mean when they're afraid. Do-hyun paused. I'm not excusing what he did. I'm explaining what happened next. Silence filled the office. Amora stared at the man before her, trying to reconcile this information with the narrative she had constructed over 6 years. Tae-jun as the cold, heartless man who had discarded her without a second thought. Tae-jun as someone who had secretly searched for her every day since she left. Both versions existed. Both were true. He broke me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He looked at me and told me I meant nothing. And I believed him. I know. I was pregnant with his child, and he made me feel like I was worthless. I know. Why should I give him a chance to do it again? Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Because Minit-jun deserves to know his father, he said finally. And because you deserve to hear the truth about why it happened. The truth. The photograph. The one that appeared during the board meeting. It wasn't an accident. Someone leaked it deliberately. Someone who wanted to create exactly the situation that followed. Amora frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying that what happened to you was orchestrated. Someone wanted you gone. Someone who saw your relationship with Chairman Kang as a vulnerability to exploit. Who? That's what he wants to tell you himself. Do-hyun straightened. Will you meet him? Not today. When you're ready. On your terms. Amora looked at the flowers she had refused to accept. At the legal documents she hadn't opened. At the door that separated her from the world where Kang Tae-jun waited. Tomorrow, she said. 7 p.m. My residence. Do-hyun bowed again. I'll inform him. And Mr. Park. He paused at the door. Tell him that if he's expecting the woman who left Seoul 6 years ago, he'll be disappointed. That woman died the day he called her nothing. Do-hyun studied her for a moment. I don't think he'll be disappointed, he said quietly. I think he'll be terrified. He left without explaining what he meant. That evening, the hotel. Tae-jun stood at the window of his penthouse suite, watching Lagos transform into a galaxy of lights below. The Eco-Atlantic development spread before him, reclaimed land that housed the city's most exclusive hotels and residences. A city built on ocean, solid where there had been water. Like Amora, she had built herself on nothing, and become something magnificent. His phone buzzed. Do-hyun's message was brief. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Her residence. Her terms. Tae-jun exhaled slowly. She had agreed to see him. That was more than he had expected. More than he deserved. He thought about what Do-hyun had told him, how she had responded, what she had said. The anger he understood. The pain he had caused, he understood. But there was something else now. Strength. The woman who had walked out of his office 6 years ago had been wounded. Devastated. Barely holding herself together. The woman who had agreed to this meeting was different. She was no longer someone he could dismiss. She was someone he would have to earn. The next evening, Banana Island. Tae-jun's car pulled up to Amora's residence at exactly 6:55 p.m. The compound was elegant without being ostentatious. White walls softened by tropical plants, security that was present but unobtrusive, architecture that blended Nigerian and contemporary elements. She had built something beautiful. He stepped out of the car alone. Do-hyun remained in the vehicle, understanding without being told that this meeting required privacy. A uniformed guard led him through a garden filled with frangipani and bougainvillea. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of flowers. And then he saw her. Amora stood at the entrance to her home, wearing a simple white dress that made her dark skin glow in the evening light. Her locks were pulled back from her face, revealing the elegant lines of her features. She was not smiling. But she was not hiding either. Chairman Kang. The formal address stung more than he expected. Amora. We'll speak in my office. She turned and walked inside without waiting for a response. He followed. The conversation. Her office was smaller than he expected, comfortable rather than imposing. Shelves lined with books in multiple languages. Artwork that spoke of both Nigerian heritage and global perspective. A desk positioned near a window that overlooked the garden. Amora sat behind the desk. Taejun remained standing. You can sit, she said. I prefer to stand. Suit yourself. Silence stretched between them. 6 years of unspoken words. 6 years of pain and regret, and the child neither of them had mentioned yet. You found us, Amora said finally. I always knew you would. I didn't know he existed. Taejun's voice was carefully controlled. Until 3 days ago, I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Would what have mattered? If you had known. Amora's gaze was steady. That day in your office. If I had told you I was pregnant, would it have mattered? The question hit him like a blow. He remembered that day with perfect clarity. The photograph on his desk. The shareholders watching for weakness. The fear, because it had been fear, he understood that now, that his attachment to this woman had created a vulnerability his enemies could exploit. He remembered the words he had spoken. You are nothing. And now she was asking if knowledge of a child would have changed anything. I don't know, he admitted. And that's not the answer you deserve. No, it isn't. I was afraid. The words came out before he could stop them. Someone had discovered us. Someone was using you to get to me. In my world, that kind of vulnerability gets people killed. So you eliminated the vulnerability. Yes. You called me nothing. I called you the opposite of what you were. His voice cracked slightly, because I couldn't admit what you actually meant. Not to them. Not even to myself. Amora's expression didn't change. You broke me. I know. I left Seoul believing I was worthless. That I had imagined everything between us. That I had been nothing more than a convenient distraction. That was never true. How was I supposed to know that? Her voice rose for the first time. You looked at me like I was a stranger. Like everything we had shared was a figment of my imagination. And I was standing there, carrying your child, and you made me believe that telling you would be the worst mistake of my life. Amora. So I didn't tell you. She stood, her hands flat on the desk. I walked out of your office with your baby inside me, and I never looked back. Because you taught me that the man I loved didn't exist. He was just a fantasy I had invented to make the loneliness bearable. Taejun absorbed her words like blows. He deserved every one of them. I was wrong. Yes. I handled everything wrong. Yes. And I've spent 6 years regretting it. Amora paused. Do-hyun said you looked for me. Every day. Why? Because losing you was the worst mistake I ever made. Because I couldn't eat or sleep or function without wondering where you were. Because, his voice broke. Because you were never nothing. You were everything. And I was too much of a coward to admit it when it mattered. The confession hung in the air between them. Amora's expression remained guarded, but something shifted in her eyes. Pain. Recognition. The faintest shadow of the love she had buried. It's been 6 years, she said quietly. I know. I've built a life without you. I know. I'm not the woman who left Seoul. I'm not going to fall into your arms and pretend none of this happened. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Tae-jun took a step forward. Let me meet my son. The child. Amora didn't respond immediately. She stood behind her desk, her expression unreadable, weighing his request against 6 years of protective instinct. He's 5 years old, she said finally. He's intelligent, sensitive, and far more perceptive than any child should be. He's spent his whole life without a father, and he's built his identity around that absence. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about you anymore. This is about what's best for him. I know. If I let you into his life and then you disappear, if you decide this is too complicated, too inconvenient, too far from your world. I won't. You can't promise that. I can promise that I will try. Tae-jun's voice was raw. I can promise that I will never call him nothing. I can promise that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of him, even if I never succeed. Amora studied his face for a long moment, searching for deception, finding only desperation. He asked about you, she said quietly. Tae-jun's breath caught. He did. Last night, after he saw you on the street, he asked if you were his father. What did you tell him? That we would talk about it tomorrow. She smiled faintly. He accused me of always saying tomorrow. He sounds like his mother. He looks like his father. The words hung between them. Truth, finally spoken. He's asleep now, Amora said. But if you come back tomorrow, during the day, when he's prepared, I'll introduce you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Her voice hardened slightly. This is a trial, not a guarantee. If I see anything, any sign that you're going to hurt him, you'll never see that. We'll see. She walked to the door of her office and opened it, a clear dismissal. Tae-jun moved toward the exit, then paused. Amora. She looked up. I know I can't fix what I broke. I know I can't take back the words I said. But I want you to understand something. What? These 6 years without you were the worst of my life. His voice was quiet, intense, completely stripped of his usual control. I've spent my entire existence building power, accumulating control, eliminating weakness. And then I lost you, and I realized that none of it meant anything. Amora's expression flickered. You called me nothing, she whispered. And you became everything. He walked out before she could respond. That night, Amora stood at Minute-jun's bedroom door for a long time after Tae-jun left. Her son slept peacefully, unaware that his entire world was about to change. Tomorrow, he would meet his father. Tomorrow, the careful narrative Amora had constructed, the story of an absent father who lived far away and couldn't be part of their lives, would crumble. Tomorrow, everything would be different. She leaned against the doorframe, watching Minute-jun's chest rise and fall. She had loved Tae-jun once. Desperately, completely, in the way you love someone when you're young enough to believe that love conquers everything. And then he had destroyed her with a single word. Nothing. She had rebuilt herself from those ashes. Built a career, a foundation, a life filled with purpose and meaning. Raised a son who was kind and intelligent and curious about the world. She had survived. But survival wasn't the same as healing. And seeing Tae-jun tonight, hearing the crack in his voice, seeing the desperation in his eyes, had awakened something she had spent 6 years trying to bury. Hope. The most dangerous thing of all. The next day, Minute-jun knew something was happening. He had the morning's worth of evidence. His mother's careful outfit selection, the extra attention she paid to his clothes, the way she kept glancing toward the door like she was expecting someone. The man is coming, isn't he? He looked up from his breakfast cereal. The one from the street. Amora set down her coffee cup. Yes, baby. He's coming to meet you. Why? The question was simple and devastating. Amora knelt beside her son's chair, bringing herself to his eye level. Do you remember when you asked about your father? Minute-jun nodded. The man who's coming today, he's your father. She watched her son process this information. His grey eyes, Taejun's eyes, widened slightly, then narrowed, then settled into that serious, thoughtful expression he wore when considering important matters. He lives far away, Minit-jun said carefully. That's what you told me. He does. He lives in Korea. Why is he here now? Because he found out about you. He didn't know you existed, and now he does, and he wants to meet you. Why didn't he know? Minit-jun's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. Didn't you tell him? This was the moment Amora had dreaded. No, she admitted. I didn't tell him. Why? Because. She struggled to find words that a 5-year-old could understand. Because when I left Korea, I was very sad. And I didn't think he wanted us. But he does want us now. He wants to know you. I don't know about the rest. Minit-jun considered this. Is he scary? Amora thought about how to answer honestly. He can be. He's a very powerful man, and he's used to people being afraid of him. But I don't think he'll be scary to you. Because I'm his son. Because you're you. Minit-jun processed this for a moment longer. Then he nodded. Okay, I'll meet him. You don't have to. I want to. He looked at his mother with those grey eyes. I have questions. The meeting. Taejun arrived at noon, as arranged. He was alone, no Do-hyun, no security, no entourage. Just a man in a simple dark suit, standing at the entrance to Amora's garden with an expression of barely controlled terror. Amora met him at the gate. He's in the garden, she said. He wanted to show you his favorite tree. His favorite tree. It's a mango tree. He's very proud of it. Taejun followed her through the garden, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear anything else. And then he saw him. Minit-jun stood beside a large mango tree, its branches heavy with unripe fruit. He was wearing a simple blue shirt and shorts, his locks pulled back from his face, his grey eyes fixed on his approaching father. Taejun stopped walking. For a moment, neither of them moved. The boy looked exactly like the photographs Do-hyun had found. But photographs couldn't capture the reality of seeing his own features reflected in a child's face. The shape of the eyes. The set of the jaw. The serious, observant expression. His son. His blood. His future. Hello. Minit-jun's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the hem of his shirt. I'm Minit-jun. Taejun realized he was supposed to respond. Hello, Minit-jun. His voice came out rougher than intended. I know who you are. The boy tilted his head. You're my father. Yes. You didn't know about me. No. Mama didn't tell you. No. Minit-jun processed this. Are you angry at her? The question surprised Taejun. No, he said honestly. I'm not angry at her. I'm angry at myself. Why? Because I made her believe that telling me would be a mistake. Did you? Yes. Why? Taejun looked at his son, this small, serious child who asked questions like a prosecutor, and felt something shift in his chest. Because I was afraid, he admitted. And when I'm afraid, I hurt people instead of letting them help me. Minit-jun considered this. Mama says fear makes people do stupid things. Your mama is very wise. I know. Minit-jun moved closer to the mango tree, resting one hand against the trunk. This is my tree. Mama planted it when I was born. Taejun moved to stand beside his son, looking up at the branches. It's a beautiful tree. It gives us mangoes. Not yet, but when they're ripe, we make smoothies. Minit-jun paused. Do you like mangoes? I've never had them fresh. Never. The boy looked genuinely shocked. They don't have mangoes in Korea. They do, but not like this. Minit-jun nodded seriously. You can try them when they're ready. I'll share. The simple offer, the casual inclusion in his son's world, hit Taejun harder than any business negotiation or criminal confrontation ever had. I would like that very much. Okay. They stood in silence for a moment, father and son, looking up at a tree that had been planted to mark a birth Taejun hadn't witnessed. I have questions, Minute-jun said finally. I'll answer them. All of them. As many as I can. Okay. The boy turned to face him fully. Why did you call Mama nothing? Taejun's breath caught. He looked at Amora, who stood at a distance, watching but not interfering. Then he looked back at his son. Because I was afraid of how much she meant to me, he said quietly. And I thought that if I pretended she didn't matter, I could protect us both. That's stupid. I know. Did it work? No. It made everything worse. Mama cried. Minute-jun's voice was matter-of-fact, but there was accusation underneath. When I was a baby, she thought I was sleeping, but I heard. Taejun felt those words like a blade. I'm sorry. You should tell her that. Not me. I have. Did she forgive you? Taejun looked at Amora again. I don't know yet. Minute-jun followed his gaze. I think she wants to, the boy said. But she's scared too. Why do you think that? Because she looks at you the same way she looks at the blue painting. Minute-jun shrugged. Sad but hoping. The following days, Taejun stayed in Lagos. The conference ended. His business obligations called him back to Seoul. Do-hyun reminded him daily of decisions that needed his attention, crises that required his presence. He ignored all of it. Instead, he spent his days building something he had never built before. A relationship with his son. Minute-jun was cautious at first, observing, testing, evaluating this stranger who had suddenly appeared in his life. But gradually, the walls began to lower. They went to the Lagos Zoo, where Minute-jun explained each animal's habits with the authority of someone who had memorized every exhibit's placard. They visited the National Museum, where the boy peppered Taejun with questions about Korean history and culture. They went to the beach, where Minute-jun taught his father how to build sandcastles Lagos style, with moats that connected to the ocean. Throughout it all, Amora watched. She didn't interfere, didn't insert herself into their growing bond. But she was always there, watching for signs that Taejun would hurt her son, watching for signs that she should end this before it went further. And, perhaps, watching for signs that the man she had once loved had truly changed. The threat emerges. 2 weeks into Taejun's stay, Do-hyun arrived at his hotel with troubling news. Lee Hyun-wook knows you're here. Taejun looked up from his laptop. How? I don't know yet. But our sources in Seoul confirm he's been making inquiries. About Lagos. About your movements. Do-hyun paused. About Amora. The name hung in the air. What kind of inquiries? The dangerous kind. He's asking about her foundation, her residence, her daily routines. Taejun stood, his entire demeanor shifting. He's going to use her against me. It appears so. Does she know? Not yet. Taejun moved to the window, his mind already calculating threat assessments and response strategies. Lee Hyun-wook. His oldest enemy. The man who had been trying to dismantle the Kang Syndicate for 15 years. The man who had orchestrated the photograph that destroyed Taejun's relationship with Amora in the first place. Of course it had been him. Do-hyun had told Amora that someone had deliberately leaked the photo. Someone who wanted to create a vulnerability. Hyun-wook had been working against Taejun even then. And now he had discovered an even bigger vulnerability. A son. Increase security around Amora's residence. Double the surveillance. I want to know if anyone unfamiliar comes within 100 meters of her or Minute-jun. Already done. But sir, this is Lagos. Our reach here is limited. If Hyun-wook decides to make a move. He won't. You can't be certain. I can be certain that if he touches them, I will destroy everything he has ever built. Taejun's voice was quiet, but the threat was absolute. He knows that. He's calculating whether they are worth the war. And if he decides they are. Taejun turned to face Do-hyun. Then we go to war. The warning. Amora found the note on her car windshield 3 days later. A single piece of paper, folded once. The Silent King has something precious in Lagos. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. Her hands trembled as she read the words. Then she walked inside her house and called Taejun. Someone left a note. Her voice was steady, but underneath it, fear. I know. I received one too. Who is doing this? An enemy. Someone who has been trying to hurt me for a very long time. Is Minute-jun in danger? The pause before his answer told her everything. I won't let anything happen to him. Or to you. That's not an answer. Amora. Is my son in danger because of you? Yes. His voice was raw. Because of me. Because of what I am. Because of the world I live in. Then you need to leave. If I leave, you'll have no protection. The threat won't go away just because I'm not here. I was protecting him fine before you arrived. Before they knew he existed. Now they know. And they know what he means to me. Silence stretched between them. What do we do? Amora asked finally. Let me protect you. Let me bring resources here, people who can keep you safe. You want to surround my son with mobsters. I want to surround my son with people who would die to protect him. His voice was fierce. Because that's what they would do. That's what I would do. Amora closed her eyes. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I never told you about him. I know. I built a life away from this. Away from your violence and your enemies and your dangerous world. And now it's followed me here. I know. If anything happens to him. Nothing will happen to him. Taejun's voice was absolute. I swear on my life, Amora. Nothing will happen to our son. The protection. Within 24 hours, Amora's residence had transformed. The security team tripled in size. Professionals who moved with the quiet efficiency of people trained for exactly this kind of threat. Surveillance equipment covered every approach. Emergency protocols were established. Minute-jun noticed immediately. Why are there so many guards now? Amora knelt beside him. Because your father wants to make sure we're safe. Safe from what? She struggled with how to explain. Some people want to hurt your father. And they might try to hurt us to get to him. Minute-jun's grey eyes, Taejun's eyes, narrowed. That's not fair. No, it's not. Can't the police help? It's complicated, baby. Grown-ups always say that. Amora smiled despite the fear coiling in her stomach. I know. But I need you to trust me. And trust the guards. And if anyone ever approaches you, anyone you don't know. I run to the nearest guard and don't stop until I'm safe. Minute-jun recited the words with the tone of someone who had already been briefed. Papa already told me. Papa. The word hit Amora like a physical blow. Minute-jun had started calling Taejun Papa. Without prompting. Without permission. As though it were the most natural thing in the world. When did you start calling him that? Minute-jun shrugged. It feels right. He's my father, isn't he? Yes, but. Then his papa. The boy said it with the finality of someone who had made up his mind. He said I could call him whatever I wanted. I want to call him Papa. Amora's eyes burned. Okay, baby. The confrontation. Lee Hyun-wook made his move on a Tuesday evening. Not with violence. He was too clever for that. Instead, he appeared at Amora's gallery during a public event, surrounded by his own security team, dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's houses. Amora was speaking with collectors when she noticed the room's atmosphere shift. People moved aside. Conversations faltered. And there he was. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark hair. Sharp eyes that assessed everything and revealed nothing. He looked exactly like the kind of man who destroyed lives as a casual exercise. Miss Nwosu. His Korean was formal, precise. I've heard so much about your foundation. I wanted to see it for myself. I don't believe we've met. No. But I know your patron. A slight smile. Kang Tae-jun and I have history. Then you should direct your business to him. Oh, I intend to. Hyun-wook looked around the gallery with theatrical appreciation. But first, I wanted to understand what he finds so valuable here. Besides the obvious. His gaze lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. I think you should leave. So protective. I can see why he's so attached. Hyun-wook stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Miss Nwosu, does the boy have his father's eyes? Amora's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Another smile. I'll be in touch. Enjoy your evening. He walked out as smoothly as he had entered, leaving Amora trembling among her guests, her son's face burning in her mind. The aftermath. He came to the gallery. Tae-jun's entire body went rigid. When? An hour ago. During the exhibition. Amora paced his hotel suite, her arms wrapped around herself. He mentioned Minute-jun. He knows. He's testing me, seeing how I'll respond. This isn't a test, this is my son's life. I know. Tae-jun moved toward her. I know, Amora. And I'm going to end it. How? By giving him what he's actually after. Which is me. Tae-jun's voice was flat. He doesn't want you or Minute-jun. He wants leverage. He wants to force me into a confrontation on his terms. Then don't give it to him. If I don't, he'll never stop. He'll use the threat against you forever. Every time he wants something, he'll hold Minute-jun over my head. So what do you propose? Tae-jun met her eyes. Let me handle this my way. Let me end the threat permanently. And then? And then what? And then I'll walk away if you want me to. I'll leave Lagos, leave your life, never contact you again. But only after I know you're safe. Amora stared at him. You would do that? Leave Minute-jun. If it's what's best for him. His voice broke slightly. I never wanted to bring danger into his life. If my presence does more harm than good. No. The word surprised both of them. No, Amora repeated. You don't get to make that choice alone. Not anymore. She stepped closer, her expression fierce. For 6 years, I made every decision about Minute-jun by myself. Who he would be, where he would go, what he would know about his father. I did that because you weren't there. I know. But you're here now. And he loves you. In 3 weeks, he's already started calling you Papa. Her voice cracked. You don't get to build that bond and then rip it away. I don't want to. Then stay. Fight. Protect your family. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. Be the father you claim you want to be. They were inches apart, breathing the same air. 6 years of pain and longing and regret condensing into this single moment. I don't know how to be a father, Tae-jun admitted. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Then learn. Amora's voice was fierce. That's what I did. That's what everyone does. What if I fail? Then fail. And try again. That's what family means. The resolution. The confrontation with Lee Hyun-wook happened 3 days later. Not in Lagos. Tae-jun refused to bring the violence anywhere near his family. Instead, he returned to Seoul. The details of what happened remained unclear to Amora. She received sparse updates. A meeting had been arranged. Terms had been negotiated. Threats had been made and countered. And then, silence. For 2 days, she heard nothing. She paced her residence, checked security feeds, held Minute-jun close every night. And waited. On the 3rd day, Taejun returned. He appeared at her garden gate without warning, looking exhausted but intact. It's done. What's done? Hyunwook. The threat. He moved toward her slowly. I made arrangements. Gave him territory he wanted in exchange for permanent protection of you and Minute-jun. You gave away territory. It was strategic. Land I didn't need. Influence I could spare. His voice was flat. The cost of keeping you safe. That's simple. Nothing about this was simple. He stopped in front of her. But the result is permanent. He understands that attacking you or Minute-jun means total war, and he's not willing to pay that price. Amora studied his face. You look terrible. I haven't slept. You should rest. I needed to see you first. He reached for her hand, stopping just short of contact. I needed to know you were okay. Amora looked at his hand, hovering near hers. Not quite touching. All the restraint he had shown for weeks. All the distance he had maintained. All the respect he had demonstrated for her boundaries. She closed the gap. Her fingers intertwined with his. Taejun's breath caught. I'm still angry, she said quietly. I know. I haven't forgiven you. I know. But I'm starting to understand why you did what you did. She looked up at him. Not the cruelty, not the words, but the fear underneath. Amora. I was afraid too. That's why I left without telling you about Minute-jun. I was afraid you would reject us. Afraid you would hurt him the way you hurt me. Her voice was thick. Fear makes people do terrible things. It does. I don't want to be afraid anymore. Taejun lifted his free hand to her face. His palm rested against her cheek. Warm, careful, reverent. Neither do I. 1 month later. The villa in Victoria Island had been Taejun's idea. Close enough to Amora's foundation that she could work without disruption. Large enough to accommodate the family he was building. Secure enough to satisfy his paranoid need for protection. Minute-jun loved it immediately. It has a pool. He ran through the garden, his grey eyes bright with excitement. And a library. And, is that a movie room? Indoor cinema, Taejun confirmed. Your mother mentioned you like films. Does it have? Every Studio Ghibli movie ever made. Already downloaded. Minute-jun's entire face lit up. Then he launched himself at his father, hugging him with the unrestrained affection of a child who had stopped being cautious. Taejun caught him, held him, and over his son's head, met Amora's eyes. She was crying. Not from sadness, from something she had forgotten she could feel. Hope. The final scene. 6 months later, Amora found Taejun in the garden at midnight. He was sitting beside Minute-jun's mango tree, his back against the trunk, his face turned toward the stars. You should be sleeping. So should you. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. They sat in comfortable silence. The Lagos night was warm, heavy with humidity and the scent of flowers. I love him, Taejun said finally. I know. I love you. Amora didn't respond immediately. She had known this was coming. Had felt it building for months. In the way he looked at her, in the careful attention he paid to her needs, in the 1,000 small gestures that said more than words ever could. I know, she said finally. I don't expect. I know what you don't expect. She turned to face him. But you should know something. What? I've been in love with you since Seoul. Through everything, the pain, the anger, the years apart, I never stopped. Her voice was steady. I tried to. God, I tried. But you're the father of my child and the man I chose when I was 24 years old and too young to know what I was getting into. Amora. I'm not too young anymore. I know exactly what you are. What your world is. What being with you will mean. She took his hand. And I'm choosing you anyway. Taejun stared at her. For the first time since she had known him, He looked completely vulnerable. I called you nothing. You did. And you're still choosing me. I'm choosing the man you've become. She lifted his hand to her lips. The man who gave up territory to protect his family. The man who reads bedtime stories and builds sandcastles and sits beside mango trees at midnight wondering if he's doing any of this right. Am I? You're trying. That's what matters. Taejun leaned forward. His forehead rested against hers. They breathed the same air. I want to marry you, he whispered. Amora's heart stopped. That's not. Not now. Not tomorrow. When you're ready. When you trust me completely. When you've seen enough to know I won't ever break you again. His voice was fierce. But I want you to know it's coming. I want you to know that you're not nothing. You're everything. You've always been everything. Taejun. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again. She kissed him. Soft. Careful. Full of all the words they had never spoken and all the time they had lost and all the future they were finally ready to build. When they pulled apart, his eyes were wet. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled. But I love you anyway. Why? Because you're Minitjun's father. Because you came back. Because you're trying. She touched his face. And because underneath all the power and control and fear, you're just a man who wanted to be loved. I was afraid of wanting that. I know. I'm not anymore. I know that too. They sat together beneath the mango tree, watching the stars. Inside the house, their son slept peacefully, and for the first time in 6 years, both of them felt something they had forgotten existed. Home. Epilogue. 1 year later. The wedding was small. 50 guests. An ocean view venue in Lagos. A ceremony that blended Korean tradition with Nigerian celebration. Minitjun served as ring bearer. He walked down the aisle with the serious concentration of someone given an important mission, his grey eyes fixed on his parents waiting at the altar. When he reached them, he handed over the rings with careful precision. Then he grinned. Can I go to the dessert table now? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Taejun knelt to his son's level. After the ceremony. That's what you said about the rings. And now the rings are delivered. Next comes the vows, then the kiss, then the desserts. Minitjun considered this sequence. Okay. But the chocolate fountain is mine. Understood. The boy retreated to sit with Chidinma, who was already pretending to wipe tears from her eyes. Taejun rose and faced Amora. She was beautiful. Wrapped in a dress that combined Korean and Nigerian elements, white silk with gold embroidery, modern cut with traditional accents. Her locks were styled with golden thread. Her eyes were bright with tears she wasn't bothering to hide. You ready? She whispered. No. He took her hands. But I'm doing it anyway. That's the most honest thing you've ever said. I'm trying to be better. I know. The officiant began speaking. They exchanged vows that had been written over months, careful words that acknowledged the pain of their past while committing to a different future. And when it was finally time for rings, Taejun slid the band onto Amora's finger with hands that trembled slightly. I called you nothing once. That was a long time ago. It was yesterday to me. His voice was thick. I wake up every morning remembering it. And every morning, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving those words wrong. You already have. Not yet. He lifted her hand to his lips. But I will. Every day. For as long as you'll let me. Forever. If you'll have me. Amora smiled through her tears. I'll have you. The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was fierce and desperate and full of everything they had survived to reach this moment. And when they finally pulled apart, Minitjun's voice carried across the crowd. Now can I go to the chocolate fountain? The end. He once called her nothing. She left Seoul carrying his child. Years later, he discovered what he had lost. And spent the rest of his life proving that she was everything. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which moment touched you the most. And remember, sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who need us to give them a chance to change. Until next time. The end.